heart failure. I am, of course, on medications for my heart and will be for the remainder of my life. I'm keeping the faith and will fight superstar Billy Graham. So I'm very happy to hear that. He is a great guy, genuinely amazing person. As I said, the most, other than, of course, his physical issues with his hip when I last saw him, which I believe he's started the process of getting taken care of now, at least until now. Now this heart issue might delay things, but I noticed he had heart problems walking just from the parking lot to the restaurant where we ate. He was out of breath, and even when leaving, he had to walk to the door, stand outside the door, catch his breath a little bit, and then walk to his vehicle. So I really wish him the best. I'm praying for him. I hope that he recovers. And Raw is in Phoenix on Monday, where he lives. Maybe Hulk Hogan and Vince McMahon should pay him a visit. That would be great, wouldn't it? Someone should pass a message on those guys. You never know when Billy Graham can pass away, and WWE comes to Phoenix all the time. He's supposedly under a Legends contract, but they never use him. So that's also very sad. The only other thing I'm going to mention right now, and Billy's Facebook is at Billy Graham on Facebook. He does have a gentleman named Mike that helps him run it, but those statements are all genuinely his. And I've done, I think, 4 shoot interviews with him now, one in 2011, a 3-hour one in 2012, another in 2013, and another one this year. So search those up on the Hannibal TV. He's also been on the GNW podcast numerous times. The only other news I'll mention, on my way back from the gym tonight, I was listening to the Grilling Jim Ross podcast where he mentioned when he signed The Rock to a development contract, it was a 6-figure contract, which was very rare in those days and has been rare up until now. It might change now with the NXT versus AEW war. I read a Facebook post from Evan Ginsberg, who was involved with the Wrestler movie, a huge wrestling fan. He said he watched NXT tonight, and I can't see them defeating AEW next week. Can't see NXT defeating AEW next week in the ratings war versus Chris Jericho, Jon Moxley, Cody Rhodes, the very first AEW Dynamite taping in a sold-out arena with, I think, something like 14,000 fans versus NXT in the 400-seat arena with the same show that we just saw the last 2 weeks, and no one was really overly impressed with other than the regular NXT fans. So I'm curious to see what's going to happen of that. I do think AEW is going to beat them unless their product continues to not be good. I think AEW has a very good chance of winning those wars unless it's a bad product, but it can't be that bad. I think they're going to do everything they can to make it as good a product as they can, but we'll see. Mela says if AEW doesn't get over 1 million viewers, they are dead on arrival. They've been advertising AEW on Raw, SmackDown, movie theaters. As I mentioned previously, the only non-wrestling person that's brought up AEW to me was my chiropractor, who said he saw advertisements for it when he was in the U.S. So people know at least about this new company, and people are going to watch it out of interest to see if they'll sustain good numbers. We're going to see about that. But yeah, and we'll see how people react to these transgender wrestlers and mostly 205 style wrestlers, because the 205 show itself we've seen hasn't been that popular. And other than a handful of wrestlers, there's not that many large wrestlers in AEW. I will make one final comment for tonight. Somebody wrote something on my GNW podcast with Tank Abbott, where we were talking about jiu-jitsu not being the most useful in a street fight. And somebody said bouncers aren't real fighters. Well, let me just explain one thing. As a bouncer, you might only rarely encounter martial artists. It's mostly drunk people of all sizes, but you do encounter gangs. You can be attacked from all sides. There's no medical people there when you're in a fight. You have to be taken to the hospital by an ambulance or a car if you get injured. There's usually no first aid there. There's no referee, and there's no rules. So if you can say being a bouncer isn't a fighter, you're a complete idiot. You might not be fighting as high-quality fighters as pro fighters, but even pro fighting has had CM Punk in it, and he hasn't won street fights that I've heard of. He got his ass kicked by Ted Hart and got his ass kicked in UFC. So for the guy that commented that, sports fighters are obviously tough. I have nothing but respect for them. But street fighters are fighters too, and they're doing it for free. And also, regarding the jiu-jitsu comment, it's because when you're in a street fight, in my opinion, because I've seen it happen, you don't want to be fighting from your back. You don't want to be rolling around on the ground, because the person you're fighting usually has friends. A lot of people don't usually go out alone. And sometimes those friends can also be drunk and be there to kick you in the head, kick you in the side of the ribs, stab you. So that's why I would say like a striking art is very useful for those situations, to strike them and flee or keep your distance with striking. Amateur wrestling, I used it for ground and pound, but striking is very good. For a street fighting situation where you're getting attacked from all sides and there's weapons around, you don't want to be really worried about submitting someone. You want to try and end this as fast as possible. But I'm not saying jiu-jitsu is not useful. I've trained in jiu-jitsu, no gi. I don't like the gis. And thank you for all these nice comments. Moscow Multimedia, who actually recorded one of my shoot interviews with superstar Billy Graham, says he's a good man, and he is a good man. He's a great man. He may have done some bad things in his life, but overall, he's a great person, and everyone will tell you that. Lanny Poffo, his name has come up on this channel, and one thing Lanny told me about superstar Graham was, even when he was at his highest levels, he always treated Lanny very good, and some champions will treat lesser card guys like shit. Some champions will treat fans like shit, but Billy Graham, I've seen him interact with fans. He's great, and he never knew me from anything, and he helped me get on the hepatitis C treatment that cured me, and he actually helped me get through the treatment, talking to me every day through the treatment. So he is a great man, and another comment here. Despite what people read about him, he's really a good person. He's a true wrestler. Loves entertaining people. That's also from Moscow Media. I agree with that. Roberto Bravo says he's a class act. And yes, you have to understand one last thing about Billy Graham when he's bitter is, as I said, WWE hasn't used him. They've had him under Legends contract. He has the record for most consecutive sellouts at Madison Square Garden, 19 out of 20 as a main event performer. They couldn't even sell out Madison Square Garden 2 nights in a row. And by the way, Billy Graham would also usually sell out the Felt Forum, which is now known as the Hulu Theater, where people would watch his matches as well. So he'd sell out both the Felt Forum and Madison Square Garden. But they don't use him. They just keep him under contract. He gets very little money from what he tells me from that Legends contract, and he could go at any time, but like they're in Phoenix Monday and they didn't use him. I think the Royal Rumble was there, and they did a Raw and SmackDown earlier this year there too, and they didn't reach out to him. So it's too bad. Lots of get well soon wishes to Billy Graham.